All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show, Tapping into Your Heart. And this is where you can learn more about how to navigate through pet loss grief during the holidays. My name is Berns Galang. I'm your host for the show. I'm actually an artist and illustrator, and I specialize in drawing animals. And I'm taking care of 7 cats right now. I just decided to put together this event because I'm also coping with pet loss grief alongside you, and I'd like to help in any way I can, especially this season, because it can be extra hard to go through the uh, pet grief, like pet loss for pet grievers during this time of the year. So, if you have spent time with an animal companion and love them, I think this is for you. And with us today is our guest speaker, Stephanie Rodriguez of Embracing Your Grief. She's a certified grief counselor and thanatologist specializing in child and adolescent grief and animal companion loss support. So, without further ado, let's welcome our guest. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Berns. Thank you so much for asking me to come and speak today.
It's an honor. Yeah, I'm happy that you're with us today. So, can you tell us more about yourself and your journey and how you became a grief counselor and animal loss recovery specialist?
Sure. I've been a practicing grief counselor for over 18 years now. It is not a first profession for me, but it is my calling. I've spent about 13 years of that time working primarily in human hospice with human loss. But since about 2017, while I continue to help people with human loss, all types of loss, I have been primarily focused on animal companion loss.
Mhm. How would you differentiate the loss of a pet compared to the loss of a human?
Well, grief is grief because love is love. So, in many ways, there is no difference. But there is a particular challenge to the loss of an animal companion that is not always faced in the loss of a human. And that is because the loss of a beloved animal is considered what's called clinically a disenfranchised loss. Now, what that means, a disenfranchised loss is any loss that isn't readily acknowledged, recognized, or honored by society at large.
Mhm.
So, in addition to pet loss being at the top of that list, it also includes other losses like miscarriage or abortion or human death by certain diseases such as AIDS, even now, even all these years later. And COVID is currently very much a disenfranchised loss. So, but for our purposes, of course, we're talking about animal companion loss. And where there is a disenfranchised loss, it leads to disenfranchised grief, which means that someone who has experienced a disenfranchised loss may not find that their grief is accepted or sanctioned or honored by society. And that can make grieving extra difficult.
Right, right. I totally agree. I actually have suffered the same because pet parents who are grieving usually suffer isolation, and it's extra hard because not everyone understands.
No.
Yeah. And um, yeah, I'd like to ask about your business name. You have a very interesting business name, Embracing Your Grief. Can you tell us more about it and
Sure.
what's
Yeah.
behind?
Thank you for asking about that. I actually this created this name many years ago. I've always done some private practicing on the side, but until the last, I started my private practice just about 2 years ago. But more like 10 or 12 years ago, I created my little business and chose to call it Embracing Your Grief because that's pretty much the foundation of my philosophy when it comes to grief. In Western society, especially, but in modern society as the whole, we are not encouraged to embrace our grief. particularly here in the United States. We're a very death denying society. And so we are a very grief denying society. We are told to get over it, move on, let go. And that is the exact opposite of what the grief experience really is supposed to be. And I have found through my practice, through my clients, that real transformation can only happen when we embrace our grief, when we lean into the experience with it and really get curious about it and fully embrace it. And so that's where the name comes from.
Yeah, I've actually been wanting to ask you because I like the idea behind it, and I actually do believe that emotions, the negative emotions such as grief, should be felt in order to release it. And
Absolutely. Well, I believe very much that there are no negative emotions. There are just emotions.
right.
We again, society tells us that sad is bad and
Mhm.
happy is good. But the words good and bad really should have no place in our emotional experiences. Some emotions are pleasurable, some are painful, but to judge them as good or bad really gets us in a whole lot of trouble. It creates a lot of neuroses. It creates a lot of shame within ourselves. So that's one of the things I really like to encourage my clients to change their perspective on is the understanding that sad is not bad and happy is not good. They are just two sides of the same coin, and you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I like your perspective on that, and seeing things from a higher vantage point really opens up a lot. And uh, if you really think about it, there's really nothing bad if you really look at it from a higher perspective and through love's lenses. So yeah, even grief, and actually I've heard of people saying that grief is actually love that's not expressed or cannot be expressed anymore.
Well, I
Mm.
not to go against you, but I think maybe what you're referring to is a quote I've heard a lot that grief is love with nowhere to go.
Oh
Is
yeah,
that
something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um I don't agree with that at all. I
Okay.
think that that has become a cliche. I think
Mhm.
it's a meme that has gotten out there, but I don't believe that it's true
Mhm.
experientially. Grief is an aspect of love, but I completely disagree with the idea that it has love with nowhere to go
Okay.
because your bond with the dead, our bond with the dead, doesn't end with their physical death
Right.
because our bond with them was not just with their physical body.
Mhm.
And love never dies. So the love that we have for those who die absolutely still goes to them and them to us. So to say that grief is love with nowhere to go, I
Mhm.
believe it just became a catchphrase and has caught on. And I'm glad you brought it up because there's a lot of that in grief. There's a lot
Okay.
of myths. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of stuff that has gotten out there in media and in social media that really isn't founded in truth
Mhm.
or in fact or in experience.
Right. Yeah, I like your perspective on that. And yeah, it's great that we've talked about it. I actually had no intention of bringing that up. It just came, and I think somebody agrees. There was a response.
Hello, baby. Yes, look at that. Oh,
Yeah, and
you are so cute.
yeah, and I totally agree that the connection that we have, it doesn't really end when they're not physically here anymore. Because
No, it
I,
doesn't at all.
I've actually experienced a connection with one of my pets who has crossed over, and I do believe that he's still with me, actually guiding me, and he's behind many projects actually. And
Good.
yeah,
I'm sure that he is.
yeah. And I actually got confirmation from other people who are intuitive, and yeah, they actually said something similar. And yeah, okay. So that's a good way to transition. I'd like to ask as well. So what are the best ways that you can share with our audience and how to overcome pet loss grief, especially during the holidays?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would encourage people not to try to overcome it.
Mhm.
It's about incorporating it. When you use words like overcome and beat or best it in some way, that's very confrontational. It's very and you're putting yourself in a position of being confrontational with yourself. There's not a lot of softness or compassion in those terms. So the way that I look at grief, what I believe one of the tasks is to incorporate the loss into your life. And the reason that I use the word incorporate, I don't know if you've ever done any baking or if those people listening to us may have done or may watch baking shows. But if you do, there are different words that are used to talk about combining ingredients.
Okay.
And specifically in baking, there's a big difference between beating something and folding something
Mhm.
in ingredients. And incorporation is the word that's used usually when you have a whole lot of dry ingredients and a very small amount of wet ingredients. And you've got to combine those two usually to make a dough, a workable dough. And if you just take this small amount of wet ingredient, dump it in all at once into that larger amount of dry ingredient, and then just stir, you're not ever going to get a dough. It won't happen. So what the recipe will tell you to do is to incorporate the wet into the dry. And that means pouring a little tiny bit of the wet into the dry and mixing slowly. And you do that until all of the wet is mixed in with the dry. And what happens afterwards is you have something that didn't exist before. You have a dough that didn't exist before you did that incorporation and wouldn't have existed if you had just dumped everything in and tried to create it. Well, that's what grief is. You have your life, which is the dry ingredients, and then there's grief, which is the wet. And if you just dump it all in and say, okay, this is what's happened, and I'm going to just push it down, and all you're going to get is a mess. You're just going to get a mess in your life. But if you slowly include the grief and work through it, take your time to fold it all together, then what you come out with after you've done that is something that you didn't have before. It's something completely different. So that's how I encourage my clients to look at the process of grief, is as an incorporation of grief into their lives.
I like your approach to that because there's a softness and a soothing approach to it because it's kind of like uh, a momentum. Like for example, like with a car that's moving fast, you can't simply just make it stop abruptly, right? Like
Right.
you have to slow
Yeah.
it down. Have to slow it down first to move to another direction if need be. And
Yes.
yeah, if you force it to stop right away, like yeah, like what you said with overcoming something or just trying to drive it away or
Yes.
ignoring it,
Push it away.
it's gonna backfire. So
Yeah. Well, and you may go hurtling through the windshield too.
yeah,
It's not going to be good. what
Imagine
happens.
what's going to happen to the contents of the car if you abruptly
Right.
stop it instead of slowing down first. So yeah, I like your approach to that and how you handle emotions or words with emotions like overcoming and as opposed to soothing and incorporating the
Yes.
emotion and just handling it in a softer, soothing way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you asked specifically though about the holidays.
Yes.
You
Since
wanted me.
Christmas is almost over.
There's a couple of really because I like to make sure that my clients have something to do. I mean, that they actually feel. I'm a firm believer in giving useful information, not just kind of talking. I don't want my words to turn into platitudes either, just that sound good on a meme and then don't really mean anything. But there are a couple of things, particularly at this time of year, that I like to encourage people to do. And um, probably, well, first and foremost is taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
You really have to be compassionate with yourself and understand that if you're grieving, and this is any kind of loss, human or animal, or even a loss other than death, um, if you're grieving, your energy is depleted.
Right.
You are not, your resources are depleted, and resources mean everything. Usually we say the word resources and we think of finances or
Mhm.
we think of energy, and both those things are included. But there are other things. Time is a resource. Emotions are a resource. Strength is a resource. And when we're grieving, all of those things are really at a low. We're running on empty a lot of the time when we're grieving. So the holidays come, and even when we're not grieving, we're told again by the media, by social media, that here's what you need to do to have a picture perfect holiday. And I like to remind everybody, nobody is having a Hallmark Channel holiday. Nobody. Nobody is having, it's like looking at photographs on Instagram. We have absolutely no, we see one beautiful picture of a perfect holiday meal and a big family around the table. And what we don't see is the drama that went on to get that picture and how many times they had to pose and take that picture. And I mean, we just can't see that. But what it does to us is make us feel like we can't do that. We can't add up to what they do. That's especially exacerbated when you're grieving. So when I talk about taking care of yourself, being compassionate with yourself, one of the best things that you can do is remember that the word no is a complete sentence.
Mhm.
And it is absolutely all right to say no. If you don't have to go to every party, you don't have to um, bake every goodie, you don't have to buy every gift. You can say no, and you don't have to give excuses or explanations. You can simply allow yourself to say no. And you have to do that. You have to do that. You have to allow yourself to rest when you can. So that's the first thing. Really advocate for yourself and take care of yourself. The other thing that I encourage people to remember is that just saying no this year, like for instance, I know we've already gone past here in the West Thanksgiving, but
Mhm.
um, here in the United States, that's a big holiday. And it's all around food, and people travel, and there's usually one family that's hosting, and it's a lot of work.
Yes.
But if you're grieving and you're simply not up to that, then you tell the rest of your family and friends who are looking to you to host this event, you tell them you can't do it. And if that means you can't do it at all, then that's it, not this year. But there are also other things. Maybe you feel like you can open up your home to host the event this year. Excuse me. But you can't do all the cooking. So have it catered. Ask people to chip in money to help pay for the catering, or ask the other people who are coming to bring dishes or come prepared to do the cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Be flexible and require that your family be flexible too. And remind yourself and everyone else that this is not forever. This is for now. This is for the time when you are grieving, when you as a family are grieving. So this year is going to look different because your beloved dead are not there. It's
Mm-hmm.
already going to look different. So it may have to look different in some other ways, but that's all right. This is also how new traditions get built. If you say to your family, I'm not going to be able to do all the cooking this year, so I need everybody to bring one dish, but why don't you bring a dish that really, bring a dish that you've always wanted to make and you've never made before. Excuse me. And so they do. And you have foods that have never been at your traditional holiday gathering before.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those foods become a new tradition. So your family has grown, it has expanded. It doesn't mean that you throw away the old traditions, but you've added something to it.
Right.
It's about changing your perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always something to gain from changing our perspective. And I like the words that you use for now, because it's not going to be like that every
That's right.
visit.
No. And we get this idea that I'm ruining everybody's Christmas. You're not ruining anybody's Christmas.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You are made to feel that you can do that by, again, media and society at large, but you can't. You really can't. And then, probably the most important thing when it comes to the holidays is, I call it acknowledging the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And what the elephant in the room is that there's been a death, that someone, either a human or an animal, who is supposed to be here is not here. And what happens a lot of the times at the holidays is everybody comes in and everybody knows, and probably as they've been traveling, have been dreading, what is it going to be like without this person or this animal there? And how are we going to, what are we going to say? What are we going to, and most people think, well, we'll just ignore it. And so everybody comes in and there's this silent pact that's been made that there's this huge elephant in the living room and everybody's going to act like it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And all that happens then is that everyone's having to look around the elephant to try to talk to each other. Everybody's having to step over its poop in the room, and everybody's uncertain. Whereas if one person, and that's usually you as the primary griever, has the courage to say, we all miss Bobo, say that's the animal's name, or everyone knows I'm really missing Bobo this year. So I'd like to just take a minute and acknowledge that and thank you all for helping me to honor him. And you can literally raise a glass as a toast, drink a toast in their honor. If it's a human being, you can set a place that remains empty at the dinner table for them. You can fix their favorite meal or their favorite dessert. And when you serve it, you say this is in honor of them. You can take their photograph and a candle and use it as a centerpiece and light it and acknowledge it. It doesn't mean that you have to spend the entire dinner conversation talking about the dead. It takes a very short amount of time. But the moment that you have acknowledged that elephant in the room, the stress leaves. Is it possible that you will cry? Absolutely. May other people cry? Absolutely. But again, sad is not bad. And it won't last for the entire time that you're together. But if you don't do that, the stress, the discomfort of the elephant that no one is acknowledging will last for the entire time that you're all together.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's something empowering and relieving at the same time when you become authentic and
Yes.
yeah, and there's always a way to convey that in a loving way and explain to your family that
Yes.
in this situation. And I like what you said about raising a glass or for honoring the animal or the one who's not there anymore. And yeah, it doesn't take the entire conversation or the entire
No.
during the
No.
celebration. It's really just a short time to honor who's not there anymore. And yeah, I like that. And what about on the side of the what about those if you have a friend or a family member experiencing the loss of a pet during the holidays? What advice can you give them on how to comfort their loved ones?
What I like to suggest to people who want to help grieving friends or family members is to do more and say less.
Mhm.
Because what we see a lot of in social media conversation and what we hear a lot of is sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your loss. That's a huge pet peeve of mine because it's become meaningless. I mean, it's what people say because they don't know what else to say.
Mhm.
And you can switch that up. You can use that phrase, but if you actually add something by saying what it is you're specifically sorry for, rather than just your loss, I mean, what do you think that loss is to them? So, for instance, you say, instead of saying, I'm sorry for your loss, you say, I'm really sorry for the loss of your sweet Bobo. I can only imagine how much your heart must hurt now.
Mhm.
And then shut up. Because here's the hard thing about talking to someone who's grieving: we can't make it better.
Mhm.
Nothing that we say is going to help. That makes us extremely uncomfortable. Because again, you have to remember we're a death denying society. We don't know what to do with death and grief and loss. And so it makes us uncomfortable, and we don't like to just sit in that discomfort. But that, to just be present with someone who is grieving, that's the greatest thing you can do. You think about it yourself. When you have been in a state of bereavement, when you have been grieving, what has given you the most comfort? And I'll bet anything it won't be something someone said.
Mhm.
Or if it is, it will be something that someone said that has been followed up by an action. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say do more and say less. So, for instance, it's the holidays, and you have a friend whose dog has died. Make a donation to a shelter in your area in their animal's name, and then get a Christmas card with, because when you make a donation in someone's name anywhere, you usually get something that tells you you've done so. So then you get a Christmas card and you put that notification in the Christmas card and you leave it in the box. for your friend. You don't draw a lot of attention to it. You just do it. Or you know of a family that's still hosting a big meal for the holidays, and you buy a gift card to something, to a grocery store or a liquor store, and you do the same thing. You put it in there and you say, this is in memory of Bobo, and you give it to them. Or you drop by a couple of bags of paper goods like paper towels and toilet paper and tissues, things that people need all the time. And you just put a little note in that says, this is from Bobo, from me and Bobo with love. And you leave it. Those are the things I'm talking about, doing more and saying less.
I love that. And action speaks for itself, and it's actually more sincere. But I can imagine how relieving that would be for the griever.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've shared a lot of heartfelt information and insights. How do you feel when you get to help other pet parents cope with pet loss grief?
It's hard to find the words for that. It's the greatest feeling in the world. It's what I know I'm here to do. And
Mhm.
that sounds kind of, I don't really like the way that sounds. I'm it's not me. I'm really just a vessel, a pipeline, because my clients help each other. Um, all the way back to 18 years ago when I first started doing this, because I'm constantly learning
Mhm.
from and the dead. I mean, that may sound strange, but they do. They help too. They always help. And it just passes through me. And it's really important when people are grieving to understand, because it is so isolating, particularly with the loss of animals. And you do feel so alone, to
Mhm.
understand that as alone as you feel, you are connected to hundreds of thousands of other sentient beings who are feeling this as well. And in some of those cases, you're connected through me. And that's a great honor for me. That's a really great honor for me.
Yeah, looks like it's a calling or something that's from your higher self. And
It is.
yeah, uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. You've really asked some good questions. I just overall really would encourage people to be compassionate with yourself
Mhm.
and remember that nobody is having a perfect holiday ever. We are sold that image of what a perfect holiday looks like by corporations and entities who want us to buy things. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So remind yourself of that when you start to get all freaked out because you don't have the perfect place setting that you wanted to have at, or you don't have the perfect gift, or you need to take a nap just in order to be able to get up and eat dinner, much less do anything else. Be compassionate with yourself and talk to your beloved dead. Ask them to help you, because they will.
Yes.
They do. And
Okay.
there's a lot of power in asking for that help.
Wow. Yes. I believe that as well. That's beautiful. And yeah, I actually did that too. And what you're saying is very helpful. And I myself would like to implement that. And you in the audience, I hope this is helpful for you too. And yeah, Stephanie, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or um, avail your services? And yeah.
Sure. Well, the best place to start is my website, which is embracingyourgrief.com. That's where you can get more information about me, and that's where you can schedule sessions. It's very easy to schedule from there. And then I'm on social media pretty much everywhere as Embracing Your Grief. Primarily, I try to put a lot of free information out in the form of videos on YouTube and on TikTok, primarily. But just search Embracing Your Grief and I'll come up that way. And there's links to all my social on my website too. So really my website's the best place to start, embracingyourgrief.com.
All right. And I'll also post the links in our description box and in our email. So I'll
Thank
put,
you.
I'll lift the links out and share that with the audience. And thank you so much for this heartfelt conversation, Stephanie, and for giving us your time. I highly appreciate it. And yeah, everyone, I hope you find this meaningful and helpful as you navigate through pet loss grief, especially since Christmas is almost already here and New Year's fast approaching. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And I wish you so much love. And yeah, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well.
Okay.
Happy you're here.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.